In the quiet college town of Cedar Ridge, nestled among towering evergreens and misty hills of the Pacific Northwest, life moved with a slow and predictable rhythm. The university, with its ivy-covered buildings and neatly manicured lawns, was known for its demanding academics and tight-knit community. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly serene environment lay an undercurrent of quiet exclusion and unspoken boundaries. It was here that four young women, Amina, Noor, Layla, and Yasmin, found themselves far from everything they had known, each carrying the weight of their separate pasts and hopes for a brighter future. They came from different corners of the world, their lives shaped by disparate cultures, histories, and hardships, yet they shared a profound experience of displacement and isolation. Amina had arrived from Damascus, her journey marked by the scars of a homeland torn apart by years of conflict. Her dreams had been simple but profound: to study, to find peace, to build a life where the echoes of war could not reach her. Damascus had once been a city of rich heritage and vibrant streets, but it had become a place where hope was a fragile thread, easily severed. She clung to memories of her childhood, moments of laughter with family, the scent of jasmine in the evening air, while navigating the cold corridors of Cedar Ridge University. Despite her determination, she was unprepared for the subtle yet relentless feeling of being an outsider. Her accent, her traditional yet understated clothing, and the stories she refrained from sharing created invisible walls between her and the others. In the lecture halls and campus cafes, she often found herself surrounded by faces that looked at her with polite curiosity, but seldom with genuine understanding. The smiles were often distant, the conversations brief and cautious. Amina's hopeful vision of academia as a bridge between worlds was met instead with quiet silences and unspoken barriers. Noor, from Casablanca, had ventured thousands of miles, with ambition blazing in her eyes. Raised in a family where tradition shaped every choice, she had sought refuge in education as a means to break free from expectations that felt suffocating. Casablanca had been a city alive with colors, music, and bustling markets, but also one where the weight of cultural norms could feel oppressive. At Cedar Ridge, Noor's sharp intellect and determined spirit earned her academic respect, yet social acceptance eluded her. Her drive to succeed sometimes made her appear aloof or unapproachable to her peers, who struggled to reconcile their preconceived notions with her quiet confidence. The subtle biases she encountered were like small, persistent wounds: raised eyebrows, hushed comments, and the frequent need to prove herself over and over again. She dressed simply, blending modesty with practicality. But even this was noted as something different in a town where conformity was comfort. Noor's ambition sometimes battled with loneliness. Success felt like a distant promise shadowed by the persistent ache of being unseen beyond her achievements. Layla hailed from Karachi, a pragmatic young woman whose resolve had been forged in the fires of necessity. Her migration had not been motivated by idealism, but by the pressing need to claim her place in a world that often dismissed her worth. Karachi's crowded streets and vibrant neighborhoods had instilled in her a sense of resilience and adaptability. She was fiercely independent and had learned early how to navigate systems stacked against her. At Cedar Ridge, Layla's demeanor was one of quiet determination, rarely revealing the depths of her struggles. Her skin, her accent, and the quiet confidence with which she carried herself marked her as different, often inviting suspicion or avoidance. In group projects and social gatherings, she sensed the invisible line that others hesitated to cross, the hesitation to fully include someone who looked and sounded foreign. Layla's pragmatic outlook clashed with the reality she faced. Success was a moving target, and acceptance seemed perpetually out of reach. Her ambition, once a bright flame, flickered against the cold winds of isolation. Yasmin's story was the most somber. Forced to flee Aleppo amidst escalating violence, she carried with her the heavy burden of trauma and loss. Her arrival in Cedar Ridge was not a choice, but a desperate necessity, a chance to escape a life shadowed by war and uncertainty. Unlike the others, Yasmin's dreams had been dulled by survival rather than shaped by ambition. Her presence was often ghost-like. She moved through campus corridors as if trying not to be noticed, her eyes carrying a distance that few dared to approach. Yasmin's clothing was modest, almost invisible, and her voice quiet. an attempt to disappear into the background of a place that felt indifferent to her existence. The university town's homogeneity only deepened her sense of alienation. She found little solace in the polite nods and careful distance maintained by her classmates and neighbors. The vibrant culture of Aleppo, once full of life and laughter, seemed an impossible memory here. Yasmin's internal world was a fragile balance between numbness and a lingering ache for belonging that remained out of reach. Though outwardly these four women attended classes, frequented the campus library, and participated in the routines of university life, their internal experiences were marked by profound solitude. Their accents, attire, and cultural differences were silent markers that distinguished them, often making them the subject of subtle prejudice and exclusion. Cedar Ridge, with its predominantly homogeneous population, was not overtly hostile, but was characterized by a quiet, pervasive insularity. The town's inhabitants were courteous but reserved, and the university's environment fostered intellectual rigor without always embracing cultural diversity. For the women, every interaction was tinged with a sense of otherness, a constant reminder that they did not fully belong. They masked their feelings behind composed facades, navigating a world that saw them as outsiders even when they sought only acceptance. This isolation was not only social but also psychological. The constant need to prove oneself, the burden of representing entire cultures, and the daily encounters with subtle dismissals fostered a growing sense of invisibility and despair. The women found themselves trapped in a liminal space, neither fully part of their new surroundings nor able to return to their origins. The gulf between their expectations and reality was vast, stretching wider with each passing day. Yet, in their silence, they each harbored a complex tapestry of emotions: hope, frustration, resilience, and a yearning for connection. This shared experience of being unseen and unheard sowed the seeds of a fragile bond, a quiet solidarity forged not by friendship initially, but by mutual understanding of the profound loneliness that marked their lives in Cedar Ridge. The story of Amina, Layla, and Yasmin in Cedar Ridge was a testament to the challenges faced by those who cross cultures seeking better futures, only to confront the harsh realities of exclusion. Their journeys were marked by courage and endurance, shadowed by the invisible walls that society often erects against those deemed different. In the stillness of the Pacific Northwest town, beneath the towering pines and serene skies, their silent struggles echoed, unseen by many, but deeply felt by those who carried them alone. As the months unfurled their relentless passage, the bright optimism that had once illuminated the hearts of Amina, Noor, Layla, and Yasmin began to wane under the cold shadow of reality. Cedar Ridge, with its serene forests and academic prestige, was a world far removed from the vibrant chaos and warmth they had left behind. Their dreams, initially fueled by hope and promise, gradually fractured as the subtle yet unyielding barriers of exclusion revealed themselves in the spaces they inhabited daily. Amina's belief in the possibility of genuine cross-sexual understanding was among the first to falter. In the early days, she had envisioned classrooms filled with curiosity, open minds eager to engage beyond superficial differences. Instead, she found herself met with an unsettling stillness when she raised her hand to contribute, a silence heavy with hesitation or disinterest. Lecturers and peers alike often nodded politely, but seldom reached beyond the surface, leaving her words hanging in the air like fragile whispers. The subtle distance, carved by veiled distrust, was perhaps the most painful, an invisible wall that kept her isolated in plain sight. Small moments accumulated, furtive glances when she entered the room, the quiet withdrawal of conversation when she approached, the awkward pauses that preceded any interaction. All of these whispered that she was different, and that difference was unwelcome. The heavy weight of unspoken judgment pressed on her, chipping away at her initial enthusiasm, transforming her hopeful outlook into one tinged with wariness. Each day's experience etched another layer of fatigue onto her spirit, yet she persisted, striving to bridge the divide with patience and grace, even as the gap grew wider. Noor's journey was marked by a fierce determination that, while admirable, collided repeatedly with unseen but palpable barriers. Her ambition was relentless. She pushed herself to excel academically and socially, believing that hard work and excellence would be recognized and rewarded. However, her efforts were frequently met with dismissive glances or subtle rebuffs, whispered judgments in corridors, sidelong looks during group projects, exclusion from informal gatherings that shaped campus culture. These microaggressions were like tiny fissures forming in the foundation of her confidence. They were not loud or explicit, rather, they were coded messages that she struggled to decipher, yet felt deeply. Nor found herself repeatedly questioning whether her successes were truly hers, or if she was merely tolerated as a token presence. The realization that acceptance might always be conditional, fragile, and contingent upon her ability to conform weighed heavily on her. Despite this, she continued to wear a composed exterior, masking the slow erosion of self-assurance beneath a veneer of strength and ambition. Yet, inside, the quiet ache of invisibility and alienation deepened, carving out spaces of doubt where certainty once lived. Layla's experience was a daily confrontation with the stark truth that no matter how much she adapted or excelled, the barriers to belonging remained firmly in place. Pragmatic and resilient, she had prepared herself for challenges in this new land, but the relentless reminders of her otherness pierced her resolve. Whether it was the hesitant handshake from a peer, the cautious tone in a professor's voice, or the subtle way her contributions were overlooked, Layla felt perpetually on the outside looking in. Her dreams of forging connections and weaving herself into the fabric of this community began to unravel, replaced by a hollow ache that echoed with loneliness. The sense that she was trapped in an invisible cage, defined by stereotypes and prejudices rather than her character or capabilities, gnawed at her. Layla's practical nature struggled to reconcile the promise of opportunity she had chased with the reality of exclusion she endured. Each day's experience served as a reminder that assimilation was an elusive goal, one complicated by unspoken biases and systemic indifference. Her ambition, once a source of light and motivation, flickered beneath the weight of ongoing rejection. Yasmin, the quietest among the four, experienced the slow but steady retreat into detachment, a protective response born of past trauma and present alienation. The horrors she had witnessed and fled in Aleppo were etched into her soul, rendering her world a landscape of shadows and silences. In Cedar Ridge, these internal scars were exacerbated by the pervasive sense of invisibility and cultural disconnect she encountered. Yasmin moved through campus life like a specter, avoiding attention, speaking little, and carrying a numbness that distanced her from even the possibility of belonging. The subtle exclusions, the hesitance of others to engage, the cultural gaps in shared conversations, the unbridgeable gulf between her past and the lives around her deepened her isolation. Her silence was not merely absence of words, but a fortress erected to guard against further pain. The weight of dislocation bore down on her with crushing force, and her dreams, once perhaps vibrant and full of hope, had diminished into mere survival. Yasmin's withdrawal was a quiet surrender to the overwhelming tide of disconnection that no encouragement or promise seemed able to counteract. Each woman bore wounds invisible to the outside world, wounds carved not by overt hostility, but by persistent microaggressions, exclusion, and cultural disconnects that slowly and insidiously corroded their sense of self and belonging. These daily experiences compounded into a festering resentment, a silent storm gathering strength beneath composed exteriors. The societal landscape of Cedar Ridge was not one of blatant antagonism, but of quiet indifference, of unspoken norms that prioritized conformity and rendered difference suspect. The systemic structures, academic, social, and cultural, though outwardly neutral, perpetuated subtle exclusions that communicated to these women that they were outsiders in a world that privileged homogeneity. Their personal ambitions and ideals, once robust and hopeful, were chipped away by this relentless atmosphere. The promise of freedom, opportunity, and acceptance that had drawn them to America increasingly revealed itself as a facade, a polished surface concealing an undercurrent of systemic neglect and subtle hostility. Frustration grew in tandem with this disillusionment. The gap between aspiration and reality widened, sowing seeds of bitterness that found fertile ground in the loneliness and alienation each woman endured. The contradictions of their experiences, being physically present but socially absent, striving for success but met with skepticism, seeking connection but met with distance, intensified their sense of disenchantment. What had once been a journey toward possibility began to feel like a slow unraveling, a passage into marginalization. Their shared experience, though unspoken, bound them in a tacit understanding of exclusion and the emotional toll it exacted. Beneath their quiet lives in Cedar Ridge lay a growing tempest of discontent, an accumulation of unacknowledged wounds that challenged their resilience and tested their hopes for the future. The women's stories in Cedar Ridge reflected broader societal tensions around immigration, identity, and acceptance. Their lives highlighted the complexities of cultural transition in environments where difference is tolerated but rarely embraced. Their personal narratives underscored the challenges faced by those who cross borders seeking opportunity, yet encounter the subtle mechanisms of exclusion that undermine their integration. As their initial optimism dimmed, the emotional landscape they navigated became one marked by isolation, frustration, and the erosion of identity. Their experiences stood as a poignant testament to the human cost of societal indifference and the enduring struggle to find belonging in a world often unwilling to fully accept the unfamiliar. In the isolating silence that enveloped their lives in Cedar Ridge, Amina, Noor, Layla, and Yasmin found themselves drawn together by an unspoken need for connection and understanding. Each woman carried within her a deep well of pain, a blend of cultural dislocation, personal trauma, and persistent exclusion that had worn away at their spirits. It was within the dim, shadowed confines of modest apartments scattered across the town's outskirts that they began to gather, seeking refuge from the cold indifference of the wider community. These rooms, faintly lit by a single lamp or the flicker of a television screen, became sanctuaries where walls absorbed their whispered grievances and the weight of their collective despair. In the absence of acceptance beyond their circle, they allowed themselves to voice what had long been suppressed: the sting of rejection, the burn of invisibility, the ache of isolation. At first, their meetings were simple exchanges of stories and small comforts, moments to remind one another that they were not alone in their struggles. Yet, as the days passed and the outside world continued to signal indifference or suspicion, these gatherings deepened into something more profound and complex, a forging of collective identity. Their shared grievances acted as a binding force, weaving together individual threads of frustration and alienation into a tapestry of solidarity. This unity was not born from mere friendship, but from a profound understanding of shared marginalization, a mutual recognition of the invisible burdens they bore. Within their circle, the masks worn in public spaces fell away, revealing raw emotions and unfiltered truths. Anger simmered beneath the surface, a quiet but potent current that linked their experiences and thoughts. Beyond the physical meetings, the digital realm offered a vast expanse where their feelings of betrayal and disenfranchisement found echoes in the voices of others who shared similar wounds. Online forums and social media groups, often shadowy and unregulated, became gathering points for the disillusioned and the marginalized. These virtual communities resonated with the pain and frustration they harbored, creating a feedback loop that magnified their sense of injustice. The anonymity and reach of the internet allowed for the free exchange of ideas and emotions, but also exposed them to ideologies that wielded their grievances as tools for radicalization. Messages framed in the language of victimhood and empowerment intertwined, casting their plight in terms of larger, systemic battles and historical wrongs. The digital space became a crucible where despair fused with extremist rhetoric, transforming their internal anger into a more organized and outward-looking force. Gradually, their worldview darkened under the weight of these influences. No longer did they see themselves solely as individuals caught in the throes of adversity, but as members of a collective that had been wronged and ignored by society at large. This shift was not merely intellectual, It permeated their emotions and actions, emboldening them with a newfound sense of purpose. The narrative they embraced framed them as agents of change, charged with the mission to reclaim dignity and demand recognition. The righteous vengeance they envisioned was not simply a desire for retaliation, but a drive to overturn the very systems and structures that had marginalized them. Their anger, once a quiet ache, erupted into a forceful energy that propelled them toward concrete plans that transcended symbolic protests or peaceful dissent, and edged into the realm of decisive, irrevocable action. The transformation from internalized resentment to active radicalization was neither sudden nor isolated. It was a gradual process, a fusion of their personal histories marked by trauma and loss, the cultural rejection they faced daily, and the seductive allure of ideologies that promised meaning and empowerment. Each component reinforced the others, creating a dangerous resolve that was as much emotional as it was ideological. Their shared experiences of pain made them susceptible to the persuasive narratives they encountered, online and within their circles, narratives that framed violence as a necessary response to systemic oppression. The communal nature of their radicalization fortified their commitment, binding them tightly together not only through friendship, but through a shared mission fueled by collective grievance. Within their small, secluded spaces, the conversations evolved from lamentations of hardship to discussions of strategy and action. The intimate trust that had grown among them allowed for the exchange of ideas that might have been unthinkable in broader social contexts. They dissected their frustrations with unflinching clarity, analyzing the perceived failures of the institutions around them and the indifference of the community to their plight. The rhetoric that permeated their dialogues increasingly adopted militant tones, emphasizing urgency and the necessity of reclaiming agency through force. This ideological shift was bolstered by their isolation. Cut off from alternative perspectives and support systems, their worldview narrowed into a singular focus on retribution and visibility. The dangerous resolve they cultivated was not merely a reaction to external exclusion, but also a coping mechanism for internal wounds. The interplay of cultural rejection and ideological seduction created a psychological framework in which violence became a conceivable, even justified path. They envisioned their actions as a means to rewrite their narratives, to assert presence in a world that had rendered them invisible. This binding conviction overrode doubts and fears, creating a shared momentum that propelled them forward. Their collective identity crystallized around this mission, with each woman contributing unique strengths, whether in planning, observation, or resolve, to the emerging cause. In this crucible of shared experience and radical ideology, the four women became not just companions in hardship, but co-conspirators in a path that promised transformation through upheaval. The solace they initially sought in one another had evolved into a formidable alliance, fueled by pain, anger, and a desperate yearning for recognition. What began as mutual support had morphed into a tightly knit collective driven by a dark purpose, a purpose that bound their fates together and set them on a course from which there would be no return. Over the course of several months, what had begun as a quiet shared frustration among four isolated students gradually evolved into a calculated and chilling conspiracy. Their collective alienation from the Cedar Ridge community, combined with the simmering resentment and radical ideologies absorbed from the fringes of the internet, coalesced into a grim resolve to exact a violent reckoning. The university campus, once a symbol of opportunity and growth, became in their minds the very emblem of exclusion and rejection, a place where they were marked as outsiders and rendered invisible. Their desire to be seen, to disrupt the complacency of those around them, propelled them toward a harrowing plan designed not just to inflict physical damage, but to shatter the prevailing illusion of safety that cloaked their environment. The decision to target a major university event was deliberate and strategic. Such gatherings drew hundreds of students into a shared space filled with music, laughter, and a false sense of security. To the group, it represented an ideal stage upon which to expose the vulnerabilities of the community and force a confrontation with the harsh realities they believed were long ignored. The event was a tradition, a time when the university's walls resonated with the sounds of celebration and youthful freedom. By infiltrating this moment of collective joy, the women intended to transform it into one of chaos and horror, a jarring reminder that beneath the polished veneer of academia lay simmering tensions and unaddressed grievances. Within this emerging alliance, Layla emerged as the de facto leader, her mind honed sharp by the radical ideologies she had encountered and embraced online. Her transformation was striking, a pragmatic thinker now driven by a fervent belief that decisive, violent action was necessary to claim agency and command respect. She had meticulously studied extremist literature, forums, and manifestos, internalizing arguments that framed their marginalization as a systemic injustice requiring uncompromising resistance. Layla's influence extended beyond ideological zeal. Her organizational skills and capacity for strategic planning propelled the group from vague discontent to focused determination. She was relentless in pushing the others to move beyond talk, urging them to prepare and execute a plan that would leave an indelible mark. Noor complemented Layla's leadership through her practical resourcefulness. Where Layla conceptualized and strategized, Noor handled the complex logistics of turning abstract plans into tangible reality. She scoured online marketplaces and discrete networks to acquire materials needed for constructing explosive devices, items that, on their own, might seem innocuous, but when combined pose devastating potential. Noor's ability to navigate these shadowy channels and manage communications was crucial, ensuring the group's preparations remained hidden from suspicion. She coordinated meetings, arranged for the discreet transfer of components, and maintained a careful balance between caution and urgency. Noor's tireless efforts were vital to transforming dangerous ideas into actionable steps, bringing the group closer to their grim objective. While Layla and Noor focused on ideology and procurement, Yasmin assumed the role of the meticulous observer and analyst. Her sharp eyes and quiet demeanor made her well-suited for surveillance and intelligence gathering. Yasmin spent hours monitoring the rhythms of campus life, tracking security patrols, studying entry and exit points, and noting patterns of student movement during major events. Her detailed observations allowed the group to identify vulnerabilities in the university's security infrastructure, pinpointing the best locations for maximum impact and devising escape routes that minimized risk of detection. Yasmin's contributions added a layer of precision and calculation to the plan, transforming it from a reckless outburst into a coordinated operation. Her work was carried out largely in solitude, reflecting her introspective nature and the weight of the task she bore. Amina, despite the deepening shadows of disillusionment that clouded her once hopeful spirit, committed herself to the cause with grim determination. Her participation was not fueled solely by ideology, but by a profound sense of betrayal and loss, of the dreams she had nurtured, of the community that had rejected her, and of the peace she had sought but failed to find. In the group, Amina balanced fervor with reflection, providing emotional grounding even as the plan edged toward irreversible consequences. Her resolve was quiet yet unyielding, embodying the heavy toll of alienation that had transformed hope into despair. The weight of her participation added a somber gravity to the collective mission, underscoring the deep personal wounds that had shaped their path. Together, the four women embarked on a painstaking process of preparing for the attack. Concealing explosive devices within seemingly ordinary backpacks and clothing demanded ingenuity and caution. They conducted rehearsals in the shadows, silent, careful movements practiced in empty rooms and secluded corners, until every step was memorized, every contingency accounted for. The tension that permeated these sessions was palpable. The gravity of what they were about to undertake hung over them like a dense fog. Moments of hesitation and doubt surfaced, but were swiftly subdued by the overwhelming conviction that their mission was necessary, inevitable even. Each woman wrestled privately with fear and uncertainty, yet the collective purpose forged a steel-like resolve that bound them together. The shared burden of their pasts, combined with the intensity of their present intentions, created an atmosphere thick with anticipation and dread. In these months of preparation, the transformation from isolated individuals into a unified force was complete. Their bond was no longer simply one of shared grievance, but of active conspiracy, an alliance forged in shadowed rooms and hidden corners, dedicated to a cause that promised recognition through rupture and upheaval. The The meticulous care with which they crafted their plan reflected both their intelligence and the depth of their commitment. Each detail was scrutinized. Nothing was left to chance. They understood the stakes, not just for themselves, but for the community they had come to despise and feel alienated from. Their actions would irrevocably alter the lives of many, and yet, within their circle, that reality was met not with remorse, but with resolute purpose. The months of quiet plotting had prepared them to shatter the fragile peace of Cedar Ridge and to ensure that their existence, long denied, could no longer be ignored. On the night of the long-anticipated campus celebration, Cedar Ridge University was alive with energy, its normally quiet halls transformed into a vibrant mosaic of laughter, music, and youthful exuberance. The sprawling student center, decorated with bright banners and twinkling lights, pulsed with a sense of community and joy. Hundreds of students, wrapped in the carefree spirit of the evening, moved freely through the rooms, unaware that beneath the surface of festivity, a dark shadow loomed, poised to unleash a catastrophe that would shatter the very foundation of their safe haven. Among the throng, the four women, Amina, Noor, Layla, and Yasmin, moved with practiced ease, their appearances unremarkable, blending effortlessly into the sea of partygoers. Their clothes were plain, their demeanor unassuming. Nothing about them betrayed the ominous intentions that lay beneath their composed exteriors. Each carried concealed within a backpack or tucked beneath garments instruments of destruction, meticulously assembled and calibrated for maximum impact. The weight of their burden was invisible to the joyous crowd, their presence unnoticed, their mission cloaked in the guise of ordinary students seeking a night of revelry. Then, without warning, the first explosion ripped through the air, a violent rupture that shattered the harmony of celebration in an instant. The sound was deafening, a thunderous blast that reverberated through the walls, sending shockwaves of panic and confusion rippling outward. The festive lights flickered and dimmed as smoke billowed rapidly, curling into the space with suffocating force. A momentary silence, heavy and stunned, was broken by screams, sharp, terrified, and raw, that sliced through the smoky haze. The explosion fragmented the space, sending shards of metal and glass cascading among the crowd. Bodies were thrown violently to the floor, and the once joyous dance of lights and music gave way to chaos and horror. Students scattered in every direction, propelled by instinct to flee from the source of the devastation. The narrow corridors and clustered groups turned into frantic channels of desperate escape, punctuated by cries for help and the frantic shouts of those seeking safety. Panic surged like a tidal wave, washing away rational thought as fear took hold. People tripped over one another, stumbling blindly in the smoky darkness, their senses overwhelmed by the acrid stench of burning materials and the chilling reality of imminent danger. The air was thick with dust and the choking residue of destruction, making breath shallow and labored. The party, meant to be a night of connection and joy, had been transformed into a nightmarish crucible of terror and survival. Before the shock of the first blast could fully settle, a second explosion detonated, a devastating echo that compounded the horror and shattered any remaining illusion of safety. This blast targeted a different area of the crowded venue, its precision evident in the devastation it wrought. Flames erupted, licking aggressively at the fabric of walls and decorations, while debris rained down upon those caught in the unfolding nightmare. The panic intensified, the cacophony of chaos swelling as students cried out, desperately searching for friends, family, and escape routes. The once vibrant space was now a landscape of ruin. Twisted metal beams hung precariously, shattered glass glittered menacingly on the floor, and smoke clung like a shroud over the injured and the fleeing. The third and final explosion marked the crescendo of destruction, an overwhelming force that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Structural damage compounded, with sections of ceiling collapsing and walls cracking ominously. The deafening roar of the blast drowned out all other sounds momentarily, replaced by the heart-stopping stillness of shock before the final onslaught of screams and sobs filled the air. The aftermath was devastatingly clear. Lives irrevocably changed, futures cut short, and a community scarred deeply. Survivors bore witness to scenes of carnage and despair, their memories etched with images of fallen peers, the haunting echoes of pain and the surreal juxtaposition of celebration turned to catastrophe. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, braving smoke-filled rooms and unstable structures to reach those trapped amid the wreckage. Their efforts were heroic and relentless, but the scale of devastation was staggering. The floor was littered with bodies, some motionless, others writhing in agony. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid bite of smoke. Cries of pain and calls for help echoed through the chaos, mingling with the frantic commands of first responders coordinating rescue efforts. The scene was a tableau of human tragedy, a stark and visceral reminder of the fragility of life and the suddenness with which it could be shattered. Meanwhile, the four women vanished into the obscurity of the night, slipping away through planned routes that led them beyond the reach of immediate pursuit. Their escape was as deliberate and calculated as their attack, a testament to the meticulous preparation that had preceded the horrific events. The city of Cedar Ridge awoke the following morning to a world transformed. Gripped by shock, grief, and a collective mourning that rippled far beyond the campus, the community grappled with the incomprehensibility of the violence, struggling to reconcile the joyous memories of the previous night with the stark reality of loss and trauma. Media coverage erupted globally, the magnitude of the attack and its chilling details dominating headlines and broadcasts. News outlets dissected every available piece of information, replaying grainy footage, interviewing survivors, and speculating on motives and perpetrators. The narrative was saturated with horror and sympathy, but also a growing undercurrent of fear and uncertainty. Public discourse grappled with questions about campus security, mental health, integration, and the warning signs that had preceded the attack. The tragedy became a mirror reflecting societal challenges. Questions about how communities nurture inclusion, how they recognize and address alienation, and how they confront the roots of radicalization. Authorities launched an intensive investigation, working tirelessly to piece together the planning and execution of the attack. Forensic analysis revealed the sophistication of the explosives and the strategic placement of the devices, underscoring the calculated nature of the violence. Delving into the backgrounds of the suspects, investigators uncovered fractured histories marked by trauma, isolation, and exposure to extremist ideologies. The women's journeys, from isolated students to orchestrators of devastation, revealed a complex interplay of personal pain and ideological seduction. Each detail unearthed deepened the public's understanding of the multifaceted nature of radical violence, where personal grievances, societal exclusion, and extremist propaganda converge with tragic consequence. The incident forced painful reflection on the challenges of integration and the consequences of alienation within academic and social communities. It highlighted the necessity for proactive measures to foster belonging and to identify vulnerabilities before they manifest in violence. The attack's legacy became a somber testament to the urgent need for dialogue, empathy, and comprehensive support systems to address the often invisible struggles faced by marginalized individuals. Cedar Ridge and its inhabitants were forever changed, the scars of that night etched into the collective memory, a stark reminder of the fragile balance between inclusion and isolation, hope and despair. In the weeks that followed the devastating attack on Cedar Ridge University, law enforcement agencies launched a sprawling, relentless manhunt that stretched across multiple states. Investigators moved swiftly and methodically, chasing down every lead, interrogating contacts, analyzing digital footprints, and scouring surveillance footage in an effort to trace the movements of the four women who had disappeared like phantoms into the night. Their vanishing act was eerily complete. No credible sightings, no traceable communication, no physical evidence that could pin them down. They had melted into the shadows, leaving behind only the horrific imprint of their actions. Despite the absence of their physical presence, the resonance of their violent act continued to reverberate through Cedar Ridge and far beyond, imprinting an indelible mark on the collective consciousness. As the investigation deepened, authorities uncovered the layers beneath the tragedy, revealing the complex and painful trajectories that had led these women to that fateful night. It became clear that their alienation was profound and multifaceted, rooted not only in social isolation but intertwined with deeply personal trauma and the seductive pull of extremist ideologies found within dark corners of the internet. Digital forensics uncovered extensive online activity, forums where feelings of betrayal and marginalization were amplified and twisted into calls for vengeance and radical action. Psychologists and experts involved in the case emphasized the devastating synergy between personal pain and ideological indoctrination, highlighting how vulnerabilities can be exploited in a way that transformed despair into destructive resolve. This intricate interplay painted a sobering picture of the pathways to radicalization, far removed from simplistic explanations, demanding nuanced understanding. Meanwhile, the public grappled with the uncomfortable truths unveiled by the incident. Conversations erupted nationwide about the persistent failures of communities and institutions to effectively embrace diversity and foster genuine inclusion. The attack laid bare the consequences of societal exclusion, how individuals pushed to the margins, dismissed or ignored, can become susceptible to narratives that validate their anger and justify violence. Discussions ranged from policy debates on campus security and mental health resources to broader reflections on social cohesion, cultural empathy, and the responsibilities of collective society. Media coverage, while extensive and at times sensationalized, often circled back to the core question: how could a tragedy of such magnitude emerge from the shadows of alienation? For survivors and the families of victims, the aftermath was an agonizing journey through grief, trauma, and the slow process of healing. The memories of that night, flashes of chaos, screams, destruction, were etched indelibly into their minds, haunting their waking moments and dreams alike. Support networks mobilized to provide counseling and assistance, but the emotional scars left by the violence ran deep and complex. The community of Cedar Ridge, once tightly woven by shared academic pursuits and social bonds, was fractured, the fabric torn by loss and fear. Annual commemorations and memorials served both as remembrance and as collective acknowledgement of the void left behind. The women who had once been strangers and social outcasts within that community paradoxically became central figures in a narrative that would define the town's history. Years passed, but the shadow of the attack lingered persistently over Cedar Ridge. The town's picturesque streets and quiet neighborhoods bore a solemn undercurrent, a collective memory that shaped conversations and influenced the cultural landscape. Schools and universities implemented new programs aimed at fostering inclusivity and early identification of social isolation, striving to prevent future tragedy. Yet the event remained a stark reminder that beneath the tranquil surface of even the most peaceful towns can lurk unseen storms, storms born from silence, neglect, and the slow accumulation of overlooked pain. The story of these four women, their descent into radicalization, and the violence they wrought stands as a tragic testament to the destructive power of isolation when left unaddressed. Their legacy is a somber call to vigilance, empathy, and the urgent need to build communities where difference is not a source of division, but a foundation for understanding and connection.